Welcome to the Love, Law, and Life Makeover Podcast, a go-to for hope, faith, and joy in changing your life. I'm Neil Presley Cox, lawyer, speaker, and author of Hope Lines. I have an easy-to-find website, neilpresleycox.com. You can't miss it. And a nice welcome for my presenter and co-host, Kelsey Gibbs.
All right. So we're going to start. We're playing a game today called Pass the Mic because one of us doesn't know how to set up sound for a podcast with two people in the same room.
And the other one doesn't know a thing about technology.
So thank you for joining us. All right. So today, Neil, you had a teaser or something you wanted to start with?
Yeah, today we're talking about parents relocating, and relocation is a word in the law. So two separated parents are sharing custody and visitation with their child, and one parent, and it's almost always the parent who has primary residential or custody in some states they call it. One parent decides to move, and perhaps not too far, but oftentimes very far away from the other parent with the child. And so then they attempt to do that through the courts. And the parent that is here, they might try to fight that, but that becomes very difficult. And if the move happens, then what winds up happening to a child in that situation, and how does everybody fare? That's what we're talking about. And I would start with this thought. Do you ever wonder if anybody can predict the future? And did you ever wonder about predicting the future, about what's going to happen to your own child? It's a scary thought, but we're gonna talk about that today. So that's the opening for relocation.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and that's coming from Neil's book, Hope Lines, and it's an amazing book that gives you, relatable stories, as well as applications and even a little bit of legal advice in there as well, which I find is super helpful. For those of you that don't know and you're just joining, Neil is an attorney in Clarkston, Washington. He's also an author and a public speaker as well as a husband and a father. And we're just going chapter by chapter through his book. And right now we're actually gonna condense two chapters together because it's actually different perspectives. We're going to go over what the perspective of the mother and then the perspective of the child in regards to relocation.
That's right. And there's a reason that I wrote two stories about relocation, one being that about the child and one being about the parent that stayed behind when the child was allowed to move very far away. I could have written a third story about the other parent who made the decision to move the child. But this is an issue that's very close to my heart, in which I've seen people and I've seen the effects of these long-term moves where you have two good parents. And so given that I have strong feelings, that's a little bit of a warning or caveat that I take a position on this. However, the law takes a different position, and it presumes that the custodial parent should be allowed to move with the child, which I think is not a good thing. Nevertheless, that's the way the law reads in most states. I think these moves are very harmful to children if you have two good parents that are involved with their child or children. And so I wrote a story about the child's perspective and what happens to the child, and about a mother's perspective when the father was allowed to relocate far away. And so I deliberately did not write the third story because I want people to see and read between the lines and think about it from a child perspective and from a what's going to happen, who's hurting perspective, and what we ought to do in these situations.
Yeah, that's awesome. Did you want to give us maybe an overview of, and we'll just go through the book by the mother's perspective in terms of kind of maybe what like what the, like kind of set up the situation of what was going on. Cause I think the character's name is Denise, and she just, you know, she's her and her husband divorced, and the husband ends up getting um rights or the ability, what's the,
Relocate. He is allowed to relocate with the child.
there it is. And just kind of like, do you want to kind of maybe recap some of that for us?
Yeah, the story concerns a father who has primary residential or custody, and he decides to move about 1,000 or so miles away with the child from the town that he's living in, where the mother lives only a few miles away. And mom, who is very involved in the child's life and visits regularly, goes to court and tries to stop the move, but the court allows the move because there's a presumption in favor of it, and because the father was able to convince the court he's gotten a better job 1,000 miles away, and so his move, he claims, is going to benefit the child in the future, and they'll have all these opportunities, and it's a better community and things like that. So the court, in my opinion, almost rubber stamps the move, just says, okay, you go. And then the father moves with this child, and mom is now reduced to seeing the child 2, 3, 4 times a year, if she's lucky, and then doing phone calls and Skype and FaceTime and things like that. And so the stories, one from the perspective of the child, the other from the perspective of the mother, actually project into the future, which I think is the key point here, is what happens to these kids. And so this kid essentially becomes what we used to call a latchkey kid. He's home, his father's working long hours and interested in other things largely, and dad's not home. So after school, this young man, as a teenager, is running around this town with some other kids similarly situated without structure. And he winds up falling prey to some of the things that a lot of teenagers do. It starts with marijuana and moves on from that, perhaps. And then the mother makes every effort to stay involved in the child's life, and she realizes she is so minimally involved because of the 1,000-mile distance and the inability to afford airfare more than a couple of times a year. And she's just hurting. There's a hole in her heart. She's got, I think she's got another child, but she's just every night she's thinking about it. And nobody winds up happier in my story. Nobody winds up happier. The child doesn't have the benefit of having mom and other relatives to provide that village he needs. Mom is just hurting, and there's this giant hole. And father is, he's frustrated and angry and just excessively disciplinarian with his son. And he's not content either. And so that's what I try to convey in these stories, is it produces pain. A child needs to look up into the stands when he's playing sports or she's playing sports and see that the parents are there and they're involved. And a child needs the parents to be involved with their school and to have that fallback place when something's wrong in one home, that the other one is a shelter, and to have the extended family. And so when you take those underpinnings, those are underpinnings like a bridge. Imagine a bridge with all these underpinnings that are really strong and deep into the ground, under the water, concrete. You start taking these underpinnings away, and suddenly you have a wobbly bridge, and you don't know if it's going to crash completely, and you don't know if driving across it, you're going to have a little wreck, but it's not the same structure. So in cases where there are two good parents and fit and not using drugs, no domestic violence, things like that, in cases where you have two parents that are involved and doing good, I take a very strong position in advising people. And I let them know that I'm taking a strong position, because some people come to me and they want to move desperately and they've already made up their mind. Maybe it's a new relationship. Maybe they just want to get far away and not have to deal with their ex. Maybe it is a better job. But I tell people right off the bat, I have very strong beliefs on this particular issue. You might need to see a different attorney. And that from what I've seen with children, these moves are not healthy if you've got two loving parents.
Wow. Thank you. And yeah, right. That's amazing. What would you say for people who are in this kind of situation? Because I know you talked about, you have like in your book, you have like the reflect section. You also have the apply section. If you see someone in this scenario, and I think in here it sounds like both the mom and the dad like do love their child. Sounds like it's mainly, I mean, the dad definitely is wanting to have the kid specifically to himself. Because I think he loses his job, right? And
Right.
he ends up, so the whole reason for the move, he quits that job and becomes like a prison guard instead. So the whole reason for the move isn't even there anymore. And they end up staying there. When this is all going down, before they move, what could the mother have done in order to help prepare for having, or to maybe something that she could have done to keep this from happening?
That's a good question. In the book, I talk about what the mother can do because it's just critically important to first hire a good attorney, and then second, you put together your legal arguments to try to stop somebody from moving, and that's in court. It's necessary to have coherent legal arguments, but I say go a step further. I say you put together a package with pictures, videos. I say you appeal to the judge's heart about what will happen to this child if those pillars that keep a child stable are removed. And a lot of judges are family people. They preface their decisions with legal arguments, but they have a heart too. And so I say you try to personalize that child and the mother's love for that child or the father's love for that child and the grandparents if they're in the same town. And so that the judge can see that wrenching the child away from these loved ones and such that they can't go to the softball game anymore is harmful. And it's going to be harmful over the next few years. It's not just going to be harmful for a few months and then everything's fine. You're going to see the effects for the rest of that child's life.
Wow. Yeah,
It's heartbreaking.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's really helpful in terms of like, what people might be looking for and, some things that they can actually do. You do give some tips on what people could do or what like specifically the mother could do after he relocated. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
It's really hard. It's heartbreaking when something's going on with your child and you can't fix it. That's one of the hardest things in this whole world, I think. And so my heart goes out to somebody in that situation. On the other hand, I think that wherever we are in life, where we are right at this moment is the start of us getting to have a good life. I don't think that anybody is consigned to be perpetually unhappy. I think God allows us to do a turnaround no matter what the circumstances. And it's always human of us that when things seem so hopeless to say, well, it's obvious that there's no fix here. This one's too big. God's not even involved, or he wouldn't have done it in the first place. Or she, if you choose to believe God is a matriarch, that's okay. But I don't believe that. I believe that wherever we are right now is the start of building something really good. And sometimes it may be that a person's pain is actually going to be used to the good, and people struggle. I struggle when I'm in the midst of pain to take a broader view and think, well, this could be used to the good. I just want out of the pain. That's very, very natural. But I do believe that sometimes there are collateral benefits to the suffering that goes on. That's one thing, and that can be used to help others. In fact, that's one of the most powerful things you can do when you're hurting is use the experience, because you gain deep experiences and you can then turn around and help other people that might be in the same situation. And that is, to me, one of the best therapies in the whole world. But there are some more practical tips, and some of them are to just embrace technology. I say this as a person who doesn't do it, but use Zoom, use FaceTime, be nosy with your child, even from a distance. Um, think about asking extended family for help with airfare. Think about finding a way to appeal to your ex to maybe send the child one more time. Use the 5% rule. Just try to build a little bit better. Just build it so that the relationship between you and your child that's 1,000 miles away can just get a little bit better. And then just be gentle on yourself about everything that's happened. Try to do some stuff to alleviate the guilt so that you can move forward. And keep your eye open on the school and how things are going. It may be possible that you could modify the parenting plan, get your child back to your town if things are going really badly in the other town. And that involves talking to the school and finding out who your kids' friends are, and then speaking to their parents, not in an investigatory way, but in a, I'm involved and I'm glad to get to talk to you, and I'm glad our kids are associating and things like that. But you'll gain information from that. And of course, you'll gain information from your child. Again, not in a querying way, not in a questioning way, but more conversational and allowing your child to speak about things that are going on. So it's just a very incremental thing, but there are things that can be done.
Yeah, that's perfect. Cause yeah, I was glad you had mentioned that, because I know a lot of people when it feels like they're losing everything, it's like, okay, you just need to do one step. Here's something that you can do that's going to be beneficial to get you in the right direction. I mean, even as far as like, what you said, opening up a credit card where you can collect the airfare miles, like
Right.
that's something like practical that someone can actually do to get more time with their kid.
Right.
I mean, I know that there's a whole chapter on the child's perspective of things. Just looks really difficult from what I mean.
It is really difficult. The child doesn't see things in terms of, well, I lost some pillars that made my life good, or I lost my village. They don't see it that way. All they do is they feel frustration. They feel the frustration of dad's negativity, of mom's sadness. They feel those things. Children intuitively feel what their parents are feeling. And so I always urge parents to not only not badmouth the other parent, but to work on yourself so your feelings can become more positive, because that makes a person feel hopeful. When you're around somebody and they're really hopeless, then that tends to bring you down. But if you're around somebody that has positive energy, that tends to lift you. I learned that from my wife, because I sort of knew it intellectually, but I learned it from her through her heart. So yeah, the child's perspective is not one of a lot of insight, but one of a lot of coping and looking for people in his life, in his a little bit unstructured life, just to hang around with, and to appease the negative feelings that have infected his spirit from the time he was younger and all these painful things happened.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of hurt that goes into not having both parents healthy and working together. So, I think that I feel like that pretty much sums everything up for today. Were there any like closing things you want to cover?
One last thing, and that is that when you're a parent, and I'm a parent, then I'm a parent until I stop breathing. And that means that we're going to stay in the fight as a parent. Sometimes we can help fix things. Sometimes we can only be there to keep loving them. Sometimes we just go into a quiet place and we pray, because there's absolutely nothing we can do and we're very worried. But we stay in the fight. We stay, and we are a source of stability for them. They know that we love them. They know that we're here, and they know that we're not going to stop being there and loving them. So there's a lot of power in that.
Yeah, that does bring quite a bit of hope to a lot of people out there, I feel. So thank you, Neil, for coming up and for showing up and for sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom with us. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
I don't know. That's a wrap.